भारत में कोरोना की अलग अलग दवाइयों पर क्या कहना है WHO का। भारत में कोरोना के गंभीर मरीजों के इलाज में उपयोग किए जा रहे रेमडेसिविर इंजेक्शन, स्टेरॉइड्स आदि दवाइयों पर क्या कहना है विश्व स्वास्थ्य संगठन का। आइए जानते हैं WHO की चीफ साइंटिस्ट सौम्या स्वामीनाथन से।
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my question. This is about remdesivir. We see that a lot of people in India are using up precious resources they have to buy up a drug that WHO has said is not effective for treatment of COVID-19 in hospitalized patients. And it's a bit puzzling because a number of countries are also donating doses of remdesivir. And we also understand that the company is expanding production. Could you comment on this? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Priti. Just looking around, who may want to start? Dr. Swaminathan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Priti. I can start, and others might want to come in. The area of therapeutics and treatments for COVID-19 obviously is of great interest to people, and unfortunately has not been, with as much dramatic progress as we've seen in the vaccines or even in the diagnostics, for example. So while a large number of clinical trials, have been done and are ongoing, we're tracking something like 9,000 clinical trials in our registry. There have been very few large trials which have given concrete results on some drugs. And I think the first one, and still I think the most important one, is the role of steroids, corticosteroids and dexamethasone in the treatment, especially of severe COVID, severe and critical cases of COVID-19, those who require oxygen and those who require ventilation benefit. There's a mortality benefit. The Solidarity trial is probably the largest trial in the world to have tested remdesivir. All the other trials, there are 4 or 5 others, much, much smaller. And also the Solidarity trial was able to look at mortality because it's a large trial, and mortality is really the end point that most clinicians and patients would want to see an impact on. And as far as remdesivir and the impact on mortality was concerned, there was no difference in this large trial and also in the meta-analyses compared to the control group. So this is why the WHO Guideline Development Group, which is a completely independent group of experts, nothing to do with the research group, and which looks at evidence that's synthesized across all of the different studies done across the world. And as you know, we now perform something called a living meta-analyses and a network meta-analyses, which looks at the impact of different drugs when they're used in combination or alone, found that remdesivir did not have a benefit in terms of mortality or in terms of deterioration. What it did do in the trial conducted by the NIH was it reduced hospitalization duration. So one has to look at the benefits versus the costs of a drug, and that's again depends on the country context. Some countries reducing hospitalization by 4 days would be an advantage. In other countries, that is not the major driver, and it should be based more on the impact on patient outcomes, which is, again, mortality or deterioration. So our guideline at the moment recommends against the use of remdesivir. We will look at emerging evidence and update our guidelines as it becomes available. But I think it's important for physicians and doctors to be aware of the latest evidence and to use it in whichever drug it is, to use it judiciously and wisely and at the right time, and also to look at the benefit versus the cost. So obviously every country makes their own treatment guidelines based on the evidence that's available and based on their local context. And so we would leave it to the country to adopt WHO's guidelines and adapt them as they see fit. But there really needs to be analysis of benefits and costs when a drug is being used to treat COVID-19. And again, it's steroids, it's antithrombotics, and it's oxygen. Oxygen is probably the most essential and the most life-saving right now of all the drugs, and all countries need to be prepared now with the oxygen supplies that they're going to need if and when cases go up. Thank you.
And Dr. Mike Ryan, please.
Thank you, Sumia. And just to re-emphasize Sumia's point, this isn't just in relation to drugs like remdesivir. This also relates to drugs like ivermectin and others, and the WHO has issued guidance on that, and manufacturers themselves have issued strong guidance saying, please use our drug for the proper reasons and using the proper evidence. And also, I think this is one of these situations where you need to use the right drug at the right time in the right patient. And that's why primary health care and having trained doctors and nurses in the front line of a health service that can do a proper clinical examination of a patient and decide which drug, which care that patient needs. That's what's missing in our health systems. Yes, we're missing commodities, but our systems are also missing capability, the capacity to triage patients, the capacity to treat patients, the capacity to diagnose those patients, and beyond the diagnosis of COVID is to assess the severity of that disease in that patient and ensure they get the proper care. An example of this would be something like dexamethasone, which is a powerful steroid, which is what we call a powerful anti-inflammatory. That drug is life-saving when given at the right time in the right patient, because it doesn't stop the virus, it stops the dramatic inflammation that results in oxygen not transferring into the blood. And when that stops and you have inflammation and a person can't get oxygen from their lungs to their blood, the combination of oxygen given by a mask or ventilator with dexamethasone can be absolutely life-saving. But that virus, or dexamethasone or steroids, don't stop the virus. Giving steroids very early in the course of disease to otherwise well people has its own side effects and can be detrimental. So again, I would just appeal that we need to have a health-centred approach to this. And just using pharmacies to get cocktails of drugs in the hope that these drugs may help you. I understand the instinct, and everyone wants to help their own family, and everybody wants to access the best possible health care. But these drugs are tools, and like all tools, they can have great benefit, but they can also hurt you if they're not used properly.
And Dr. van Kerkhoff.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm gonna come in as well because it's such an important question. Both Sumia and Mike mentioned oxygen. So oxygen is something that is life-saving. Medical oxygen is life-saving, and WHO and partners have been working around the world to scale up oxygen availability in countries. This is a work in progress because this is a medicine, this is a treatment that does not have a substitute. We've recently launched a website, I think it was launched even today, around some technical consultations around the medical use of oxygen. These are for medical providers to be able to give this life-saving medicine to people who are sick with COVID, but not just COVID, with pneumonia, with other life-threatening diseases. But the most important thing that every single one of us can do in terms of keeping ourselves safe is prevention. So if you could prevent yourself from being exposed to this virus, you prevent yourself from getting infected in the first place. That's the best medicine of all. And so anything that you can do to keep yourself safe, do it. Because it's so much easier to keep yourself alive through all of this if you're not infected with this virus. Once we get to the point, if someone is infected, entering that clinical care pathway, that early initial assessment to have your oxygen checked with one of those oxygen saturation to see what type of clinical care you need. This is really critical. And then we have medicines like dexamethasone for people who are severe and critical. But it's really about, as much as we can, about prevention. So do what you can, keep yourself safe, keep your loved ones safe, know what your risk is every day, throughout your day, and take steps to lower the risk of being exposed to this virus in the first place.